is here tonight, and he told me I could share. He's got another battle in front of him. He was just diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and has his first treatment Monday. So that's why he's not feeling real perky. So, but on the other hand, it's just great to have him here, and I'm looking forward to getting to know him much better in the future. So, our speaker tonight, Chief Steve Kuryla.
Thank you. So there's an old saying in the SEAL teams and the Green Berets: if you quit once, you start a bad habit. That's why I'm here tonight. I didn't want to start a bad habit by not coming. Flag Day doesn't mean much more anymore to people, and it means everything to us. So before I get started, how many veterans do we have in the audience here? Please raise your hand. Welcome home. I don't care where you went, where you didn't go, you signed up and you served. That to me means you're my brother. So let me start talking about the flag. Back in 1990 in Sarajevo, I should probably give you some background on my job. I was an intelligence officer for 30 years. Started out as a desk analyst for NSA, working the illicit agent and the Spetsnaz, Soviet special agents, in a place called Field Station Berlin, 110 miles inside the Iron Curtain. And we were surrounded by 7 Soviet armies, and our life expectancy was 11 minutes. We copied Morse code, broke a cipher, ended up breaking the whole thing. There's a book coming out. They're making a movie out of it right now. The contract's in the mail as of today, so I hear. But it talks about how we toppled the Soviet Union and broke up the entire Soviet army. And it was just one young lady who saw a porch light flashing and thought it was Morse code. And turns out this head agent for all of this was in the basement, and every time he pressed the button, it would brown out the electricity and the front porch light would flash. So that's how we caught the guy. That's how we broke the code, and it just domino effect from there. So from there I went to my first real life mission was the Iran hostage crisis, and I won't get into much of that. But that was followed by Bosnia, 10-year war in Bosnia, Somalia, Haiti, Rwanda, Zaire, Bogota, Liberia. It just never stopped. So my specific job was to run a team of SEALs, Green Berets, MARSOC, which is now MARSOC, but at the time they were Marine Recon, and go do the intelligence work needed so that guys like Team 6 could go in and get Bin Laden, tell them exactly where to go, what time of day, which way the door swings, those kinds of intelligence things, so they can come home successful. And then we get to go back and do battle damage assessment and find out how could we do it better, what can we do next time. So I started out enlisted for 9 years in Berlin, and when I came back from Iran, I got tapped to go brief President Reagan. He had heard from all the brass about all the money they needed and all the other things they needed, but the Desert Eagle 1, we called it, was an absolute disaster. Plane crashed into a fuel tanker. There was a hell of a sandstorm, 3 meters of sand coming straight down every minute, and nobody checked the weather. So they flew right into it. And we had to leave the country with 8 dead people and never did get the hostages out. There's much more to that story, but I'll leave it at that for now. So when I got back, Reagan wanted to talk to people who were actually on the ground, not the brass who would run it from the Pentagon. And at the end of the briefing, he said, "Why are you enlisted?" Well, I had dirt floors growing up, no chance to go to college. And he gave me a direct appointment into what they called the Chief Warrant Officer program. So I then went from 21 years in the Army as a Chief Warrant Officer. And that was the very beginning of JSOC with Charlie Beckwith and all those names that you know. So that leads us up to Desert Storm, Panama, Just Cause, Pablo Escobar, a bunch of other missions. So that kind of gives you a background on what my job was. And it was a never-ending gerbil wheel. We called it playing whack-a-mole. So in Sarajevo back in 1990, there were prisoners behind the wire in what used to be the Olympic Stadium. It was a gorgeous place until the war hit. And these guys were behind the wire. You can flash back to Dachau and Birkenau and Auschwitz, and that's what these guys looked like. They had rags hanging on and bones sticking out their chest and eyes that were sunk an inch back into their head. And they had no hope. And all of a sudden, I show up with a rucksack full of water and food, And I got 6 guys with me that are loaded up with the same thing. And we got an American flag on each shoulder. These guys lit up. They turned into humans right there in front of us. And they couldn't believe that somebody was coming to help them. The sad part is we weren't there to help them. We were there to get on another aircraft and fly away and go do another mission. But we dumped all our rucks, and we gave them food and we gave them water. So the sight of that American flag to them meant hope. That somebody, even if they were going to die doing it, was going to come help them. And I can't even imagine what it felt like to them. In East Berlin, you could look across the wall, and I got a chance to go across the wall in denied territory multiple times. The American flag was looked upon by those that had been arrested and held behind the Iron Curtain as a symbol they would die for. And they did. We lost 132 East Germans that were a support network for U.S. intelligence because one U.S. soldier sold out and gave all the information to the Russians. But they knew that they would never have the chance to live the American dream. But they believed in it so much that they were willing to die for it, and they did. You go to Iran, the flag is looked upon with hatred, and they burn it, and they step on it, and they walk on it, and they drive over it, and it's a real hoopah. They have a blast doing the American flag. But even the people that are doing it, most of them still love America. They can't wait to be free. Contrary to everything you see on TV and social media, they genuinely love America. Not all of them. I mean, we got some crazy people in America too. But the Sharia law, the fanatical Muslims, the people that are just oppressive no matter what, they're never going to love America. But they're afraid of it. They're afraid of what it means and the prosperity that comes. Tanzania, Nigeria, 2 embassies got blown up. The American flag was the rally point for people that had no hope to make it through the rest of their day. But they knew if they got near that flag, that's where everybody was, with medicine and food and water and transportation. So the flag is a symbol. It sticks out. Those bright colors, they'll light your heart up when you're in the darkest place. I won't even get into the number of hostage rescues when they were literally 30 seconds from having their head cut off when we kicked the door down. And when they saw the American flag on our chest, they were stunned. They were literally stunned from total resignation that there was no hope and they were going to die to this enormity of tears and love and couldn't wait to get out the door. And then we have to separate them and have somebody else take them because there's a hostage thing called, yeah, it just flew out of my head, sorry, might be chemo. We have to separate ourselves so they don't trauma bond to us. So we get to look them in the eye in that 2 seconds, get them out the door, save their life, and then walk away, turn to smoke, disappear. They don't get to know who we are. And then somebody else comes in and takes over. But that little glimmer is what keeps you going when you've lost your best friends and you know that you're going to go kick a door and there's 7 guys inside with fully loaded AK-47s waiting to shoot you, and you kick the door anyway. There's something about it. There's something primal. And I don't know how to explain that to America anymore. When the wall came down back in Berlin back in 1989, November of 89, we were gearing up for Just Cause, invasion of Panama, bring Manuel Noriega back to justice. I was shocked to see people standing on the wall, celebrating fireworks as the Soviet military stood by and let them. It should have been a massacre. It almost was a massacre that night the wall came down. A lot of people came across the wall and stuck their hand out and said, "Where's my $1 million in my Mercedes?" Because that's what they knew democracy was. And when they found out that they had to make decisions and stick by them and work hard for democracy, they said, "Screw that, put the wall back up. I don't want anything to do with that." The other half prospered, and it's an incredible country now. I have not been back. It's on my bucket list. But I can't even imagine there's places where you could walk now that you would get dead, seriously, by guard towers and snipers and dogs on chains. In Somalia, everybody knows about Black Hawk Down. They don't know what led up to it. It was a humanitarian disaster. We brought $300 million of medicine and food to the port facility in Mogadishu. Mohammed Farah Adid collected up what he could store in his own warehouses and poured diesel fuel on everything else and torched it, just to starve the people out. But the people that actually got some food, every bag of rice, every bottle of water had an American flag on it. And some of them, it was the first time they'd ever seen it, and they didn't know what it was. But they will remember forevermore. People ask me, don't you get mad when Americans burn the flag or they desecrate it? My answer is pretty complex, but at the same time, it's simple. And it takes time for them to understand the nuances of my answer. Yeah, I get mad. But more so, I'm sad that their ignorance takes over their brain. It's a double-edged sword. They have the freedom to burn the American flag. Try to do that in China or downtown Tehran. See how long it takes for a truck to run over your head. It's just not done. It's not allowed. So it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, I brought people home in boxes, pieces, parts missing, with an American flag draped over it. And I brought friends home that died later and gone to their funeral with an American flag on their coffin. And to watch somebody desecrate that flag, it does things to me at the primal level. But I have to get my conscious brain involved, the adult in the room, to say, look, they're stupid. They need to go home and slap their parents because they brought them up stupid. And I'm telling you, it's gotten worse. My daughter called me from San Francisco. She's going to law school up at Hastings University, and they're actually having hate groups in the dorms that are going against, I guess they call it counterculture now. But we're under attack, and it's pretty obvious. So let's take a moment and talk about flag desecration a little bit more. People assume that desecration means burning it, doing nasty things to it. There's another whole level of marketing that's going on. I've seen a dozen American flags with a different colored stripe in the middle of it, whether it's law enforcement or fire or LGBT or trans or whatever. That's a form of desecration as well. The purity of the American flag, the red, white, and the blue, and the stars. It is so, I don't know that there are words to tell you people what it feels like to come out of a place where there's no hope and there's no light and see the American flag. It just does things to you at the neurochemical level. Your hair stands up, you find a newfound energy, and it's like, thank God, I'm back. And I hope none of you ever have to live through that or feel that. But then, that's a catch-22 as well. So let me get into Tier 1 a little bit. I came home a mess. We had a 72-hour mission that went sideways. Short food chain. I was the commander. My boss was the Secretary of Defense and the President. And our mission was to go in and do a certain operation long before the war was even on anybody's radar. It led to disposing of chemical weapons that were U.S. weapons that we gave Iraq to fight with Iran. It led to a whole bunch of other things, and the 72-hour mission actually turned into 26 months. So they dropped in an 18-wheeler van that was full of download equipment, satellite relays, top secret, what we call special compartmented intelligence, SCI. And all that information was contained in this 18-wheeler van that we buried in an inflatable tennis court tent. And then we covered it with sand to make it look like a sand dune, so it blended in with everything else out there in the desert. And we were somewhere between Jordan and Baghdad, and I'll leave it at that. 26 months in, we can't get the antenna to come down. You gotta climb the pole. And every time we did, the cable would snap. We can't send information back. So we'd spend 30, 90 days in Baghdad and Mosul and all these other places that nobody knew that we were going to be, and did all of the intel work prior to the military showing up for the big war. And we would come back to our trailer, sneak into the sand dune, and then type up all the information and upload all the photos and send it over satellite back to the States. Eventually it got to where the antenna was broken completely, and we had to physically climb 70 feet every time we had to send something out. So we finally get the notice we're leaving. We got 30 minutes to wheels up. Been there 26 months. It's time to go home. We're ready to kill each other. And a National Guard unit showed up with what we call a TOW missile, a tube-launched, optically wire-guided missile. And it moves at Mach 2, 2 times the speed of sound. It's got a depleted uranium rod about 2 inches in diameter in the middle of it. And coming in at Mach 2, the kinetic energy punches a hole through a tank, and then white phosphorus goes in the hole behind it and melts the tank from the inside. Otherwise, you gotta have a warhead the size of your car to take out the tank with all the armor. So they defeat the armor by speed, by a puncture wound, and phosphorus. Phosphorus does not stop burning until it's completely depleted. They saw us in the tent. They thought we looked like Iraqis, and we probably smelled like Iraqis. And they launched an anti-tank missile at us. I was on the pole sending the last intelligence data back, and I was above the sand dune, and that's the only reason I didn't get white phosphorus on me. The concussion blew me off the top of that pole and shattered my neck in 4 places, my back in 8 places, ejected my intestines out the front. Later on, we found out the shock wave was almost Mach 7, and it totally destroyed all of the secretion tubes in my pancreas and my liver. So I ended up full-blown insulin dependent because my pancreas is fine. It makes insulin, but it can't get it anywhere because all the tubing is crushed, all the plumbing is gone. Long story short, I went through 41 reconstruction surgeries. I finally met a doctor named Dr. G up in Daly City in San Francisco. He worked on Christopher Reeves when he broke his neck and kept him alive for almost 8 years. He put 64 electrodes inside my spinal cord, literally on the skin of the cord, and embedded a battery pack and a computer in my hip, and it's all run by a little wireless iPod. Everything from the nipple line down now is run by electricity. So on one hand, it keeps the muscles alive, like those stomach exercises you see on TV. And in the other half, this new program, I can actually block the pain signal that's going to my brain with a harmonic on that computer. Now I'm off all the Demerol and the morphine and the methadone and the oxy and the fentanyl, all the stuff that I was on. So then my brain came back miraculously, and I started having nightmares about Sarajevo. And we're talking 30 years down the road. I never thought about it. And all of a sudden, oh, it's every night. So I finally signed up to go see a shrink. He was down in Sanger, and he was a former dust-off pilot in Vietnam, been shot down 6 times. Came out as a full-bird colonel, left the military, and started doing psych for veterans. And he told me, Chief, you got to start writing stuff down in some sort of a chronological order so that we can start attacking this on some sort of a smart way. Well, I'm intel. We don't write things down. We don't talk to people. We don't tell anybody anything. But it was literally eating me from the inside. That led to a book that led to a 10-book series. So the series is named 6 Days to Zeus. And that came from the fact that Zeus is the code word we used on the radio. One word. That way they can't find you, they can't drop artillery and mortars on your head. You say one word, Zeus, we're done, everybody knows, everything's good. It was 6 days from the time they hit us with a missile until someone came looking for us. So I laid in the desert while my guys died. Some of them we never found. They just vaporized with the white phosphorus. And for those that won't read the book, or I struggle with this, and I'm sorry. One of my best guys, Goose, was still alive, and he was screaming. And he had a ball of white phosphorus burning a hole through his chest. And I put him down with a K-bar knife. He was begging me. And all the weapons had cooked off. There was nothing but fire and flame. And there was no hope for this guy. He was just screaming. And it was probably 4 to 6 days of that screaming that I finally got to him, crawling with a broken back and neck. And they found that wound and decided if I killed him, then I must have killed the whole team. So they went hunting, and they court-martialed me for 6 counts of premeditated homicide. Because when they boxed me up and sent me to Landstuhl to the neurological center in Germany, they found gold bars and crypto and condoms and heroin and all the things we use in covert operations to get through checkpoints. And they decided if I had all that, I must be rogue. I must be a real bad guy. So maybe the team found out, and I got rid of them all. Then they followed it up with a tox screen. And when they got the blood work back, I had what we call Ranger candy in my blood system. handfuls of Motrin and Demerol, and the team doc would inject me 6 times a day just to keep me moving, because I had so many other injuries from jumping out of planes and blowing your shoulders out with rucksacks and all the other things we do. And I'd already had, 30 years in, I was ready to go. I was supposed to retire and not go on that mission. And they found that in my blood system, and that just added to the, I call it cubicle disease of the prosecutors. And I ended up on life support at Walter Reed, and I'll tell you about my bad hair day. They came in and told me, you're never gonna walk again because the doctor took out the wrong vertebrae and the wrong disc. Oh, by the way, your wife sent a fax, she's divorcing you, and Jag is standing outside the door to read you your rights. And all that happened within 3 hours. And I ended up living in a park 3 years in the back of my pickup truck as a homeless guy. Now, how I went from briefing the president to living in a truck in a park was beyond my wildest imagination. And then I had a situation at Walter Reed. I had died once in the desert, and it was really confusing. But at Walter Reed, it was something totally different. I had the whole out-of-body experience, looking down on myself on the table. It was the most magnificent thing I had ever experienced. Every question I'd ever had in my life was expunged. All the stuff and stress in my life, this voice told me, it's not yours, don't worry about it. It's all part of my plan. And I really didn't understand what was going on. But the warmth and the love and the comfort that was there compared to where I'd been my whole life was just beyond comprehension. And then out of the blue, they hit me with the paddles and brought me back. And I woke up on the table, opened up front and back, 18 inches. 2 guys inside of me with their elbows, and they had syringes down into my heart and brought me back to life. And I was so hostile to those people for about 5 years. I was just so mad they brought me back. So I want you all to know, I've heard some of the stories and read some of the books, but it's real. It happened to me. I went there. It changed everything in my life. So now, a couple steps forward, I always wondered, how did I come home and they didn't? What makes me special that I went from being homeless to a quote celebrity? I've got a 10-book series written. They're making 3 movies right now. A guy named Philip Noyce and Mike Medavoy that did Patriot Games, Sum of All Fears, Clear and Present Danger. They're making a movie, Live Day. That's another thing I should tell you. People that end up dead or halfway dead get hit by an RPG or roadside bomb. That's our Live Day when we come back to life. So the first movie is a Live Day. The third movie is Dairy Queen, about Berlin, the Morse code. And then the other movie is called The Asset, and it's about the 10-year war in Bosnia that led directly to 9/11. And nobody seems to know that. I ask people, what do you know about Bosnia? Very little. What do you know about Monica Lewinsky? They know everything. They know about the impeachment. They know about the sex offenses, all of that. But they don't understand that the Bosnia War started in 91, right after Desert Storm, probably before Desert Storm. But it was a Muslim against Christian war. Does anybody understand why they picked 9/11, September 11th, to hit the towers in New York City? Anybody heard? That's the day they stopped the armistice for the Crusades. 1587, September 11th. And they decided to hit the towers on the same exact day and restart the Muslim-Christian war worldwide. So in Bosnia, the Muslims, the Mujahideen that we had trained to kill Russians in Afghanistan showed up to protect the Muslims. We would hit a Muslim target, they hit the Madrid subway. We'd hit another target, they hit Khobar Towers. We hit a third target, they escalated to the USS Cole. Then it was both embassies. And then finally NATO got involved and said, okay, we're gonna do the Dayton Accords. We're gonna set up a green zone in a little town called Srebrenica. And all the Muslims can go there and be protected by NATO troops. 80,000 people showed up in a town smaller than Mariposa. And it wasn't long before they realized there was 18 Danish soldiers guarding them. And the Serbs went nuts. And they came in and they buried most of them alive with a bulldozer. And we were not allowed to intervene. So at the end of that, 8,000 young boys and women were found in a mass grave is when Al-Qaeda hit the towers in New York City. So the escalation of a 10-year war in Bosnia that led to another 20-year war in Iraq and Afghanistan is lost on the American public. And I was baffled when I got back and recovered enough to start writing and talking to people and doing some homework on what do you guys really know? It's been watered down. Social media has got everybody's attention. Our kids have been hijacked. But I gotta tell you, with all of that, everything I just told you about, there's much, much more over 30 years. The American flag is the one thing that kept us going. So I hope you take that home with you. I hope you pass that on to some people. So let me talk to you a little bit about Tier 1 and then I'll shut up. I was on surgery 21 or 25, somewhere in there, and I was in a wheelchair, had a bunch of broken hardware again. And I was in miserable pain, and they gave me 21 different prescriptions from the VA. And I rolled out into the pond and put cement blocks in my lap and had a 12-gauge shotgun with a deer slug. And I was done. I was just done. There was a snowstorm from hell, pouring down rain, hail, snow. It was miserable. And I was more worried about shaking so hard I was going to miss. So I'm leaning my head back and I'm looking up at the sky full of nothing but rocks coming down. It was crazy. It was like gravel. And there was one star that showed up in the middle of all that mess. And my brain went, what is that? And that's when I realized what I was doing and how many people had worked so hard to keep me alive and get me back on my feet. So I threw the gun into the pond and I went in for help. And I ended up locked in the psych ward at Fresno for 3 days. And they basically stripped me down, put me in a room that was 50 degrees and constant air conditioning, and let me sweat out all the drugs. Just let me scream. And about halfway through the second day, about 3 in the morning, I had this rancid smell hit me. I'm squatted down in the corner. I got water running off me, and I'm supposed to be alone in the room. They had put a 96-year-old Alzheimer patient in the room with me, and he had pinworms. So he was bleeding from the rectum, and he was covered in feces and 5-inch nails, and from head to toe, he's got this little skinny beard. And they were making a bet on whether or not I'd kill this guy, because he looked like a Haji and he smelled like a Haji, and I'm like, yeah, well, I came up out of it and had him by the neck, and luckily I caught myself. And they thought it was a blast. They had a riot. They had a big investigation in the whole thing and came up with the idea that I must have been hallucinating the whole thing, but I documented it in the book, book number 2. But I knew, based on my rank and my experience in my career, if they were doing that to me, what are you doing to all these other guys? And that's when I started Tier 1. Now, you can go to the Pentagon, they'll tell you, we go to war. We don't do that stuff. That's the VA. And the VA is like, look, we'll get you titanium legs. We can get you all the pills you ever wanted. But we don't work on the soul. Nobody's working on the soul. And that's why I started Tier 1. Everybody wants to blame everything on combat, PTSD. Well, that's a small portion of what's going on. Let's talk about the methamphetamines and the 12-pack and a bottle of Jack every night and the wife beating, and you've been married 5 times and it's always the women, right? Some of these guys can't take it, but some of them have to. So we've all heard about 22 a day. We're at 68 a day right now. 68 veterans a day are killing themselves. And the data has been sliced and diced and watered down so that nobody wants to talk about it. But I'm telling you, there's only one other place on the planet that I know of that's helping me, and that's Warrior Heart down in Arizona. We send guys down there for at least 90 days to chemically detox them. We give them 2 months off, find out if they're going to go back doing the same thing or are they serious about changing. We've got 3 programs at Tier 1 right now. There's a 5-day program, and it teaches them how to breathe and meditate and do all the muscle memory stuff so they can get ready for a 30-day program. We go out to the Merced River Canyon, and we go up to the redwoods in the park, and we go other places that tourists aren't allowed to go. We've got special permission from the superintendent up there. And it started out to be nothing but Team 6 and Delta guys, and then we expanded. And now what we know is that we're only dealing with 50% of the problem. We train our soldiers how to go to war. We don't train them how to come home. The wives and the kids have to figure that out. So if we're not teaching the wives and the kids what to look for, the number of phone calls I've gotten from wives going, hey, he was fine until he came up there. He just killed himself. What'd you say to him? Well, you missed it all. Because they're walking around with their arms locked and their jaw locked. I'm good. Because they know guys that aren't good, and they're good until they're not good. So we work through the 30-day program and then the 90-day program where they actually start mentoring the new guys that are coming in to get that perpetual cycle going. But the next step is to spread to first responders and the wives and the children, at least on a seminar basis, so they know what they're looking for, because they've been left on their own to figure it out, and it's just horrible. So I'm hoping the websites are back up. I've had a hell of a time with admin, but both of the websites, Archangel 6 was my call sign in the desert. That's my author site with all the books, and then tier1base.org, and it's all in the flyer tonight. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys listening to me. It may be my last public appearance for a while, but it really meant enough to me to go through what I'm going through to get out here and talk to you folks. So thank you for showing up. I just heard him say, God bless you. I want you to know he already has.